what's up? I'm Dustin. I'm going to show you how I made this DIY Mandalorian helmet out of foam and spray paint because you guys voted for it on my Instagram. It's between Boba Fett and Mandalorian. I'm glad you chose this because I really wanted to make it. It's a little bit different than Boba Fett's helmet. So there's downloadable templates in the description. Maybe you can make your own. I'd love to see it. I'm going to show you how I made this one. So right off the bat, you'll notice that the Mandalorian's helmet is very similar to Boba Fett's helmet, but he's got sharper cheeks and kind of different side pieces, and obviously the color's different. So I'm going to be using templates for this whole thing, which you can download in the description for free. A big shout out to Punished Props Academy for their video and their templates, which I based these off of, and tried to make these really easy for you guys to follow along with. So first thing to do is just cut these out. You can print them on regular 8.5 by 11 paper. So let's cut them out. Alright, so now that all the templates are cut out, I'm going to trace these onto some craft foam. Now these are 99 cents a piece at the craft store. These are 5 millimeters thick. I call these medium. I'm using these medium ones for kind of the face area. Then I'm going to use a thicker foam for the rest of the helmet. So you can get a whole pack of these at the hardware store. These are like garage floor mats. They're 10 bucks for the whole pack. You get a ton of it. This is 10 millimeters thick, and this is what I'm going to use for the rest of the helmet. So I have the templates labeled, which goes on which. So you just trace it on here. I like to use a ballpoint pen because it actually writes really well on the foam. So you just go ahead and trace all these out. All right, so just starting with these medium ones for now, I'm going to cut these out with a very sharp utility knife. Some of these I'm going to cut straight down, but some of them need to be cut at an angle, and they're all labeled which is which. So that way they can fit together perfectly later. So these templates are for the left side of the helmet, so you actually need to trace that side, then flip them over and trace the other side, and then we'll have 2 sets of each that will fit together like a mirror image. Alright, before I move on to the thick foam, I want to actually glue these medium pieces together because I'm really excited to see how the cheek comes together. You'll notice that they kind of have specific curves here. You really got to like watch the edges. One kind of curves down, then another piece sort of curves back up, and then you got this little triangle that sort of like curves up and holds it all together. So to glue these together, I'm going to use BARGE glue, which is like a really heavy duty rubber cement. The trick with this is that you apply a thin coat to both sides of the foam. You let it dry for at least 5 minutes, like really let it dry, then put it together really tight. You can watch the registration marks to see if you're in the right spot, but the more important thing I think really is just lining up the edges. So start with one side and just keep going little by little, pushing that glue together, because once it connects, it's really not coming back off. And just keep going, working your way all the way around until you get to the other end. Okay, and then just push it together really tight. So here we go. Yes. All right, cool. I just wanted to feel good about that before I moved on. I think it turned out just right. So now I'll trace the rest of the templates on the thick craft foam. Make sure you label everything really carefully too, because you're gonna thank yourself later. Don't forget to do the mirror image of all these too. Okay, time to cut. Okay, the cutouts are done. So now it's time to glue all of the edges together. Be sure to only glue the edges that are connecting to another piece because not all of the edges do. All right, glue is dry, so time to carefully put these all together. I'm just pushing these really hard, just to make sure it's making contact all the way around. All right, 2 halves, looking pretty good. Came up a little short on this one here for some reason. I don't know what I did wrong, so I'm gonna fill this gap in. But once I do, I've got 2 really great halves. Right, pretty good. Okay, I gotta fill that in. You know, one thing I just thought of before I glue these 2 halves together, later on when I insert the plastic shield into the eye front section, I'm gonna need it to sit flush against the inside. So since I used medium and thick foam, I don't have an even surface here along the top where the thick foam is, so I'm just gonna shave that down really quick with the knife and just cut a little notch across the top here so later the plastic will sit really flat. Okay, so now I'm gluing these together with the BARGE cement. Okay, there we go. All right. So obviously the front is a little loose because it's not held together with anything, but you can see how it's gonna come together. That's looking pretty good. So now I'm just gonna do some quick cleanup with some sandpaper. If there's any spots that are totally out of whack, you can clean them up with a knife, or anything that's just a little rough, just use a sandpaper. All right, so you could just use sandpaper on this whole thing, but if you have one, you could use a rotary tool. So this is totally optional, but I'm gonna use it now just to go over some of the hard edges, just to really smooth things out. Okay, that's looking pretty smooth. So now to fill in any last minute little gaps or any imperfections that I still have, I'm gonna use some regular white caulking. This is the kind like from your shower. That way when it dries, it'll stay a little bit flexible and it won't crack, since this foam helmet's always gonna be a little bit flexible. All right, so make sure this dries really well. I'm gonna set the helmet aside for now and move on to the side pieces. So I've got templates you can print out for that. This will be made in kind of layers on the craft foam. So we'll start by cutting out the templates. These little stripy parts on the template just come out completely. All right, these are the templates for all the layers. Some of these will be on the medium craft foam and some will be on thin craft foam. This is the thinnest you can buy at the craft store and it's 99 cents. So I'll just trace these out on the foam. And then don't forget to do another set for the right side. Okay, so I'll just cut these all out with an X-ACTO knife. Alright, so these side pieces basically fit together like this. So now I'll just glue all these pieces together with the BARGE cement. Alright, so I'm just going to clean up some of these edges with the rotary tool, make it nice and smooth. Okay, these are ready to be glued onto the helmet, but before I do that, I'm just going to hit this with a little bit of sandpaper. Caulking is a little rubbery so it doesn't sand great, but I'm just going to smooth out some of the bumps if I can. Alright, so to glue these side pieces on, I'm first just going to trace out exactly where it goes so I can lay the glue down. Alright, so I'm just going to attach this bottom piece first, then I'll use the X-ACTO knife to cut these extra lines. So then I can hit this with the heat gun, which will help shrink those lines a little bit and give them more definition. Okay, now I'll just glue those top pieces on. Alright, that is looking really cool. I'm super happy with how this is turning out. So now I'm gonna give the whole thing a nice clear coat. You could use Plasti Dip, which is popular. I'm gonna use PVA craft glue. So I'll just brush this on, give the whole thing a nice thick coat. You know, I just realized I completely jumped the gun and I forgot 2 more pieces that need to go on this. So I'm just gonna give this a full coat anyway because it's gonna take a while to dry. Then I'll add those pieces on. Alright, while that first coat is drying, I'm going to make all the rest of the pieces on thin craft foam. So on the templates, you'll see that there's an additional face piece that's going to go right across the top, so you got to make both sides of that. So I'll just do the usual. I'll cut this out, trace the template, then cut out the foam. Okay, I think this is dry enough now. So this is going to go across the front, which gives it the extra bump that we needed, plus it kind of smooths out some of these creases. You know what, before I glue this, I just noticed that this surface is the same height as this surface, so it makes this section not pop quite as much, which I don't like. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this one off right here so that I can have this little extra bump here. On yours, you could just double up the thickness of this one so that it pops one layer higher, but I'm just going to cut mine. So I'll glue these with the BARGE cement. I left a little extra in the middle and on the bottom, so that's easy to trim after it's on. Alright, that looks good. So just to really marry this seam right here, I'm going to take the rotary tool and go over that very carefully to match that angle. Alright, that worked pretty good. So the last thing I got to do to the front of this is just do this very thin strip that goes across the top. So it's not in the templates. All I got to do is cut a really thin piece. So I'll just do that out of the thin craft foam and then cut it really straight and glue it on. Alright, so moving on to the back panel, almost looks like a little vent. So we've got the little kind of frame and then 6 little pieces that go in between and overlap. So using the template, I'll just cut those out of thin craft foam. Okay, I've got all these little pieces. I think I'm going to assemble these on a piece of tape just to hold them in place before I glue it on. Okay, got my little vent thingy, so I'm going to glue this to the back using super glue. Alright, that turned out pretty cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is add this strip that goes across the top right here. So I made a template for the size and shape of the end, and then you just got to make it really long and just stick it all the way across the top until it gets to the back. So I just make that out of thin craft foam, and then I'll glue it into place, and then I'll just cut the back of it when it gets to the right spot. So for these middle lines, I'm going to do that same trick as before where I use the smaller part of the template. Then I'm going to hit it with the heat gun really lightly just to define those lines a little bit more. Okay, those are all of the foam pieces for real this time. So now I'm going to hit the new pieces with some PVA glue. Then I'll give the whole thing one final coat and let it dry really good. Alright, this is totally dry now, nice and smooth. So it's ready for paint. I'm going to start with a layer of gray primer. Okay, the primer is dry, so now it's ready for the real magic. I'm going with spray paint here. Had a hard time finding the exact right color, so I'm going to do a mix. I'll do a full coat of this metallic aged bronze first, and then when that dries, I'll do a very light coat of this metallic chrome. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, time for silver. While we're watching this paint dry, be sure and like this video and subscribe to the channel so I can make more DIY videos for you guys. Alright, this is looking really cool. I'm happy with the way this color came out. So now you'll notice that the side pieces and the back vent are kind of a lighter shade. So I'm gonna use some acrylic paint that I have, just kind of experiment a little bit with mixing these colors and try and find the right shade and paint it on with a brush. Now the border on the back panel is the lightest of all, so I'm going to try a kind of strange technique, and I'm just going to use some of the silver chrome, spray paint that onto this plate and then brush that on. Okay, I think that actually worked. It's definitely shinier than everything else. So now I'm going to give the whole thing a coat of grease and grime and rust, and I'll just kind of use some brown acrylic paint and kind of water it down and just go over all the cracks and all the creases and just really make it look grimy and grungy. It really helps to just rub it in with your fingers. So put it on light with a lot of water and then just rub it in until it kind of dries, and then it looks really greasy. Okay, it's looking nice and dirty. So now I'm gonna hit the whole thing with a nice glossy clear coat. All right, paint is done. So I guess the last thing I have to do is put in the face shield. So I bought this on Amazon. It was 20 bucks. It's like a protective face shield. You can actually see through it, sort of. So I think what I'll do is just take this extra piece of craft foam that I have, and I'll make a little pattern out of that first, because I just really want to play it safe before I go cutting this thing. I'm gonna switch to this thinner one, actually. Okay, I think that's the right shape. So I'll take this pattern and I'll trace it onto the mask itself. It's crazy that this faceplate I bought turned out to be exactly the right width. Okay, so I'm gonna cut this out of the face shield. So this is pretty thick plastic, so I think I'm gonna have to just go around the whole thing with my rotary tool to cut it out. And then I'll wash your window. Okay, ready to put inside. So for that, I'm gonna use hot glue. This will give me a little bit more time to hold it into place while it dries before it totally locks in. All right, and that's everything. So now finally, the moment we've been waiting for, this is the way. Where's Baby Yoda? Hey, thanks so much for watching. Be sure and like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this build. I'll see you next time.